At a glance, you might think you can already tell what you'll get with V-Rising. Maybe an isometric PvP experience, sandbox world building, unique living, changing environment, or how about all of the above? V-Rising is a unique blend of different titles I'm pretty sure I didn't know I wanted. Straight off the bat, I'd say if you ever thought you might want Battlerite, mixed with Valheim, maybe Rust, and a sprinkle of vampire goodness, a common request from gamers, then you've come to the right place. As it's currently in early access, we just want to brush over the experience and feel until it's more firmly released. But we can say now it probably could have gotten away with being a release in its current state. Controls feel similar to the likes of Battlerite, a top-down arena game we've previously covered. You have separate controls for movement and the direction you attack. A myriad of options to customize your experience, whether it be through combat weapons and abilities or gathering materials. The ability to turn your camera position at any time really opens up the way you interact with the world, enhancing the feeling of exploration and the sense of immersion that comes with it. The main draw to the game for us was how the environment genuinely felt like a fully fledged living world. One that doesn't exist because of the player, but goes on despite being logged off as you lifelessly lie on the floor until you're forced to carry on grinding and working. But enough about me, the world is living, as NPCs will interact with each other in so many scenarios, whether it's when we kite them to fight each other, or they bump into one another along the road to address some of that long-standing AI beef they had with each other. Whether you PvE or PvP, the choice and customization of available server types means you can really find the style that suits you. As the foundations of the game are pretty solid, you can then easily decide whether you want to work through the content peacefully with your fellow players, or embark on a spree of griefing, looting, and pillaging, until of course it happens to you and you log off for the last time. There's a real sense of exploration and mystery throughout the world, the environment always teasing that experience you aren't quite ready for, whether it's this roaming vampire hunter, or a tree that decided it now wants to bash in some skulls. In the true sandbox way, you aren't hidden from the dangers that exceed your current power level, and if anything, it's great motivation to improve and come back for the challenge. This sense of danger is also showcased through the day and night cycles, altering the impact of the environment to the player in distinctly different ways. Feel free to give us a like and thumbs up if you enjoyed the video, or even a subscribe if you fancy seeing more of the same.
The premise of V-Rising is a familiar one. It essentially mixes your traditional vampire fiction with the crafting, building and survival of games like Ark, and it combines these things and puts them into an isometric game. And while these in themselves are not that unique, V-Rising puts them together in the same pot to make a really interesting environment for a new game. And again, while it doesn't do a massive amount to bring new ideas and innovations to the table, what it has done is excellently implement the mechanics and design elements to make a smooth, polished and well-executed experience, which in an age of games where a lot of games are half-baked and unfinished, is a welcome surprise.
A surprise, to be sure, but a welcome one.
Set in a sprawling open world of caverns, forests and countryside, you play as a freshly coffin-popped and resurrected vampire and have to traverse a world where humans have driven your kind to the edge. And like in many survival games, you gather resources, build a home for yourself, and work your way towards better and better gear. You'll also have to hunt down world bosses to unlock new craftable items and technology, but we'll dive deeper into that a bit later on. One last thing to warn you about before we move any further is that you're really going to want to stay out of the sunlight during the day. Traditional fictional vampires don't tend to do too well in direct sunlight, and nor will you in this game. Sunlight can and will catch you out if you don't keep to the shadows, which is a really cool little mechanic, but when it does catch you out, there's a pretty hefty damage over time. When you jump into the game, you have to decide what you want to play, and how you want to play, either PvP or PvE, and also how many people you plan on playing with. Depending on what you enjoy, this will vary person to person, as you can see on the screen. And because Nex and I were playing as a pair and we'd done some PvE to learn the mechanics, we chose to jump into Duo PvP. These menus are all really intuitive and easy to use, which is really nice. When you've chosen your server, you'll load in and you have to create a character. There are a couple of options here like hair, accessories and skin color, and it's a nice simple way to customize yourself and not look like the other players around you. After you've created your character, one of the first things that the game has you learn is the combat system. We thought there's enough here to let you play around and keep engaged during a fight. But some people who are used to having a lot of skills on the number keys might want a little bit more complexity. because although it does feel great, it is very simple compared to a lot of other isometric games. However, saying that, this is fundamentally a survival and crafting game, and there's plenty more outside the combat to make this simplicity not much of an issue. But I do think it's worth pointing out for players that might want something a bit more from combat specifically. While you're in combat, you have a weapon, a dodge, and 2 skill buttons. The dodge can be changed when you unlock dodge-specific skills. For example, this one leaves behind a shadow that explodes and allows you to dodge a second time. The weapon skills you have are determined by the weapon itself. For example, this mace has a slam ability, and other weapons like crossbows have this AoE damage ability. One thing that does add a bit of complexity is the ability to switch weapons out on the fly during combat. So depending on what you have with you, you should be able to be pretty flexible from fight to fight, switching between things like swords, crossbows, maces, and basically anything that you can fight with that you have equipped. And if you have a look down at the bottom of the bar, you can see 2 skills. In this case, for my skills, I have 1 ranged attack and 1 counter. This ranged attack can be helpful while playing with a melee weapon, and the counter, when activated, gives you a relatively long window with which to trigger a parry when an enemy hits you with an attack. If you open up the skill menu, there seems to be a lot of other skills to unlock, so depending on your playstyle, you'll likely find a combination of skills you enjoy. And to help you get the most out of all of this, we come to the meat and potatoes of survival games. The gathering, the crafting, and the building. Almost straight away, you're going to have to build yourself an outpost and start crafting. During our playtime, the gathering and production mechanics did feel really well implemented. And while there's still a bit of the grind which is synonymous with survival games, it's nowhere near as bad as other crafting survival games on the market, where the need to spend most of your time hitting rocks and trees sucks the fun out of the game. Setting up your base or castle in this game is actually a lot of fun. And it was cool to watch things grow over time as Nex and I began to create, expand and upgrade our little pocket of the map to use as an outpost. From here, you'll decide which world bosses to hunt, and each of these targets will give you new skills, craftables, and even crafting stations, all needed to get you better and better gear. If you choose to join a PvP server, you'll need to keep an eye out while you're roaming the world gathering resources, because there's a very real chance you'll run into another team of enemy players. There's also one more mechanic I'd like to touch on quickly, which is the blood and the buffs. In this game, you're going to feed on humanoids and wildlife around you for 2 main reasons. Firstly, this will refill your blood meter, which reduces over time, and when this gets down to 0, you start taking damage. This pool is also a resource that allows you to cast a heal over time, so you want to keep it as topped up as possible as you play the game. The second reason you're going to want to sink your teeth into the living is for the little percentage buff you can see here. Different creatures will provide different buffs, and the higher the percentage, the more benefit you're going to get from it. However, drinking any blood that's not the same type, or has a lower percentage, will overwrite this, so you really have to be careful what you decide to snack on.
Overall, what we can say about this game is it's a gem that probably no one really asked for. It seems inspired by a lot of successful qualities from titles in different genres, and as a fully fledged experience, covers a whole range of player needs through combat, base building, exploration, boss fights and more. And as a current early access title, it's an even more impressive feat. The flow to the gameplay through day and night cycles and their effects on the player made us come up with new casual strategies where we'd gather materials during the night and work in our base during the day, always keeping an eye on the in-game time when making our next decision. The open world was so much more than just running to your next objective. We were often stopping for interesting materials or loot, or just having the puzzle of running from shadow to shadow to save our beautiful vampire skin from the sunburn. Made more tricky as the sun's journey across the sky caused the shadows to slowly move around objects too. The way that players impacted the map also created this dynamic aspect to playing, where building bases to block useful pathways seemed common on the servers we played, which just changed the landscape of the map a lot, as well as the understanding of who your enemies were going to be on the PvP servers at least. V-Rising looks to be a game we want to keep playing in our free time, as it's truly a fresh experience worth having, particularly if you have friends to play with, but seems perfectly doable mostly as a solo too, outside of the inevitable group dynamics you might come across from other players. Let us know what you think of the game in the comments below, and we'll see you in the next one.